Hi, Adam. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great. Maybe let's start with an introduction. I am speaking with Adam Paolozza today, and you are a multi-talented person. Why don't you actually explain what you do?
Well, thank you for saying. I guess primarily consider myself a theater creator. I started as an actor, then became interested in directing as well, and pretty much since the beginning of my career, I've been making things as well. And I am the artistic director of a company called Bad New Days that I run with my creative producer Victor Pakinko. Yeah, and I've been kind of making my own work in Toronto since about 2008, 2009. But this company in its current formation started in 2014.
Great. And can you tell us a little bit about the type of theater that you do? I know that it incorporates some physicality and sometimes sort of silent type of performances.
Definitely, yeah. I think the easy way to describe it is physical theater.
Mm.
I mean, I'm not the happiest with that term because I think it kind of maybe marginalizes it in a little bit. I consider it just theater, but it is true that it is much more influenced by physical practices. I'm also interested in work that uses mask or puppetry. But I guess, yeah, I'm really interested in physicality, movement, and my work starts with the body, the actor's body, as the kind of primary engine for creation. And once we get bodies in space, that's how we start creating. Yeah. So, and this show, obviously, that Italian Mime Suicide is an homage to my love of mime as well.
Oh, great. So you did study mime, correct?
Yeah, I went to a theater school in France called Jacques Lecoq, which is mime is part of it. We also did, like classics and mask and tragedy and lots of things. What the way that we talked about mime there that I think that I kind of the way that I think about it is there's mime like Marcel Marceau or pantomime or different kinds of mime, which I love that too. But for me, the kind of mime, the way that I think about it, and we kind of explore this in the show as well, is more mime as the primary impulse in theatrical creation, the impulse to like mimesis as an act that we do, also as a human phenomena.
Right.
Like babies learn through miming. We when we talk to people, we sort of like start to pick up on their emotions, or we have what is it called, mirror neurons. So
Right.
yeah, so for me, this like I think miming in a more robust, bigger sense of the word is about trying to understand the world by kind of bringing it into our own bodies,
Hmm.
kind of having that kind of contact. And so I think it's a good way, it's a good practice that can contribute to empathy as well. And
Right.
so, yeah, so that's how I see it.
Right. So you mentioned your upcoming show, Italian Mime Suicide, and this is a new production of of the show. Is that right?
Yeah, we in 2016 we did a double bill of two shorter works. One of them was Italian Mime Suicide. In an earlier version, as you alluded to, and that was kind of a show. That was an evening that was trying to explore contemporary ways of using mime.
Okay.
Um, and then we really liked Italian Mime Suicide and wanted to expand it. And so we were planning to do it before the pandemic, and I'm sure just like a lot of other artists, it got postponed and postponed.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, now finally, we did it in Montreal in November, the new expanded version, and that went over really well. And so yeah, now we're really excited to present it in Toronto in in a
Nice.
week and a half. Yeah.
Congratulations. Can you tell me a little bit more about the? I know that it was influenced based on. Oh, that's my pen. Based on a newspaper article about a mime who jumped to his death because
Yeah.
the art wasn't appreciated. So how did that sort of headline sort of jog your brain cells and into creating this piece?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the headline was also literally the title of the show, so it was like Italian site. So
Right.
that kind of I remember when I had just come back from studying theater actually, and even then I wanted to make a show about mime.
Mhm.
And a friend of mine sent me the article. He was like, "Oh, I think you'd be interested in this." And I just remember my emotional experience, even just at the headline, it was like, oh, it's kind of strange and like it's sad, but it also kind of made me laugh. I don't know. There's something about the image, like mime and clown and those kind of things are sometimes, taken a little less seriously, I guess, than,
Right.
like Shakespeare or things like that.
Mhm.
And also there's also like I identified with it as well, being Italian myself and being interested in mime. So there's a little personal resonance. And then I started to, think about this kind of oscillation between, the sadness of it and the funniness of it. And that kind of spoke to what I'm interested in sort of clown work and other kinds of theater that other styles that influence the show. And then as we started to develop it, my kind of I guess co-creator, co-writer Carrie Peterson, and she's also the co-director, we really got interested in this kind of bouncing back and forth between tragedy and comedy. And so once we started working on the show, we didn't really want to tell the literal story of this, this poor man that unfortunately decided to end his life. We wanted to kind of use that headline as a springboard to kind of speak more metaphorically about how maybe sort of about the decline of live arts in general. I mean, that's kind of I think it's one of those, like, it's kind of a joke in theater that, theater's been in decline. Oh yeah, for about 2000 years, like it's constantly in decline. And there's even a line in the show that says like, these artists who practice, mime and circus and clown, they're like artisans who are practicing a craft perennially in decline. And yet it's a long, slow, merry death. Yeah, again, and that kind of idea too has got that kind of tragic comic thing as well. So we sort of decided that we didn't want to do like a biography and kind of explore it in that way. We kind of wanted to be a little more metaphorical, a little more associative, drawing from these traditions of clown and circus and mime to create more of an imaginary world that I think creates a lot of space for these kind of emotions that, and it is about death. But then the show, sort of to take a different direction. And it was more about trying to find a style that could evoke that oscillation of emotions in the audience as well.
Right. Can you talk about your cast? Do you have any returning cast members from the previous iteration?
Some, yeah. We have my co-director is back, Carrie Peterson. My longtime stage manager, Dylan Tate Howarth, is back. And when we did it in Montreal, we did a big, like a lot of people weren't available. So we had a new designer, Yevgenia Mikhailova, Andre Dutoit returned, the lighting designer. I should say Yevgenia did set and costumes and projections.
Right.
We originally had a 3-piece live band that was scoring the show in Toronto. And then the composer and leader of that band, RF Mir Abdelbagi, he lives in Iran right now and he just couldn't get back into the country. So he recorded the music in Tehran, sent the files here. And I was working with this musician named Sheldon Patterson. He's a turntablist. He goes under the name of Slow Pitch Sound.
Okay.
And I was working with him on another project, and Carrie and I thought it might be interesting to ask him to come and take the music that RF had recorded and kind of translate it through the turntables. So that was a new addition to Montreal that was like pretty exciting and successful and opened up new sonic possibilities. And then the one actor who's still in the show besides myself, who's been there since the beginning, is Rob Feetham, a longtime collaborator. He's a great physical performer, just a great actor in general. And Nicholas Eddy, it was new in Montreal in November, and now he's back. And we have a brand new performer named Erica Leobrera, who's joined us, who took over for Rose Tung, who played that role in November as well. So it's a pretty new team, actually. It's kind of like each time we lose somebody, get somebody new, which is sad to see the old people go, but then the new people bring some exciting things, and so keeps us on our toes. Yeah.
Cool. Can you talk about how working with the cast, did you make any alterations with how you wanted to tell the story? What was that dialogue like between you and the rest of the cast members?
Yeah, really good question. I really like to like we create kind of through improvising, and then we sort of like write down what we do, and then it develops as we go. And so I do rely a lot on what the performer brings from their own kind of life experience. So it's kind of been interesting actually teaching the show to new people, because we kind of, in the first stage, we sort of teach them the blocking or the choreography kind of in broad strokes, but then we have to open it back up, and we have to create time in rehearsal for them to play, improvise. And in November, it worked out really well that Nicholas and Rose really brought some new stuff. So we kind of rewrote some scenes. And now that Erica has stepped in for Rose, again, we're in that same process of finding what best sits on her body, and what the characterization that she wants to explore. And I like working like that. I like being collaborative and allowing people to kind of own a little bit, have a bit more agency in what they're doing. And I find that, it makes the work a little more, I don't know, alive in that sense for me.
Nice. I'm curious about, given the fact that it's a very physical type of theater, there's some dialogue, there's movement, there's silent moments, very non-traditional, as is described, not traditional in terms of the narrative style of other plays that we're used to. How do we encourage audiences to experience this type of theater?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I was just having a conversation about this topic at lunch with Carrie. I think what we were trying to do was come up with more of an associative style, in the sense of we do tell a story. There are characters that, there are scenes that move through, emotions and actions and events happen. But we kind of wanted to, like, the way that you look at a painting or you listen to a piece of music, there's a little more space for you to bring your own interpretation. So sometimes we try to make choices that are ambiguous, or that we leave it a little more open-ended. So I think, I don't think we've kind of invented this way of working, but we're definitely interested in this way of engaging the audience to do a little more work and kind of bring some of their own interpretation to it. Like, we want to give them a little more agency in deciding what the meaning is. And I think, one thing that helps with that, and one thing that I like about silent work, is that it does that, because, I feel so much of our life, like the verbal side of our being, is appealed to, especially during the pandemic. It's like Twitter and I'm sure we're all kind of like barraged by text and
screens everywhere with loud fonts and graphics and
exactly. Yeah. So I think it's not revolutionary, but I think appealing to the kind of silent storytelling. I think there's something very in a sense maybe comforting about it. I think it's in one way easier to understand, and we can approach it, and there's no linguistic barrier in that sense. And so, I think and what I noticed when we did it in Montreal, which was encouraging for us, was that I think because it's not the literal biography of this mime, and it's not kind of like a story that's kind of exploring psychological realism, there's space for the audience to sort of like put their own emotions into it. Maybe in a weird way, I'm sure some realistic plays have this phenomenon as well, but I think what is working for us is that, it's not like you're coming to the theater and then having a story that you could have got from a magazine article about how terrible the world is right now, which sometimes I think is fantastic. And I want to go to the theater sometimes to think about the issues and wrestle with them in that way that theater can do really well. But I think this is sort of a slightly different kind of catharsis, where it's more like looking at a painting, like I mentioned, or, experiencing music. And I think that allows the audience to go like, okay, I don't need to like think about the heaviness of the world, in a literal way, but at the same time, it's exploring those same kind of feelings. So I do think there is a kind of a catharsis. So yeah, I think it's maybe not challenging in a way like like dense philosophy is challenging or anything like that.
I'm thinking Kafka.
yeah. But
maybe there's room for that too, right? So there's room for both, right?
Yeah, and we try to kind of walk this fine line between taking ourselves too seriously and being able to laugh at ourselves. And so I think, not that that's challenging to an audience, but I think that that's fun, always being like, should I laugh now? Like, you know, and even like there's narration in the show that could, you know, be considered the inner thoughts of the mime that is a little more reflective and philosophical, but then sometimes it's undercut by the action that you see.
Okay.
And I like that tension, because like I personally stand by and believe in a lot of the ideas in the show, and we're not trying to send them up that way. But I do think it's a good, like, it's this thing of kind of couching something serious in saying in a way that's a little lighter, kind of like trying to deliver the heaviness with levity. So that's something we're trying to do. Yeah.
Cool. So I came across a video that was posted on the company's page on Facebook. I think it was today, and you were talking about some of the questions that the play may kind of, you know, bring up. And it kind of has to do with, you know, why are you making art? Why is art essential now? And, you know, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I really liked what you said.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I think that, again, it's one of those funny things where, you know, we made the show in 2016. And I think, like, as somebody who makes independent art that's self-produced, like, you can sometimes feel lonely and like you're, you know, what's the use of what I'm doing? And, you know, all of those kind of like sad, you know, feelings that we have, lack of self-confidence, all of that.
Sure.
But I think like those questions that the mime asks himself, you know, about, you know, like as you mentioned too, like in the original article, it is somebody who decided to do something very sad because they felt underappreciated. I think like during the last couple of years of COVID, a lot of us who practice the arts, and I'm sure people who are practicing other things as well, there are these questions of like, you know, what am I doing with my life? Like now that the world has changed and there seems to be more serious things, like, is it, you know, does it still have meaning? You know, does it have the same meaning? Like, I think a lot of these existential questions and these doubts are definitely something that I've gone through. And so again, I think that's maybe that thing that I was trying to articulate earlier of like, you know, the audience is watching a mime kind of go through these questions. They can feel free to laugh at it, but I think maybe in a way then they can kind of reflect, well, maybe I've asked myself those questions, or those questions are hopefully relevant even if you're not an artist, like I was saying.
Right.
Yeah, and I think what we try to do in the show, like I was mentioning in that video too, is, and where I feel it is about this actual mime, at least in my feeling, is that trying to just render a little bit of dignity back into all of these artistic acts and gestures that we give. And, you know, to say like, it is, you know, it is valuable and it does have meaning. And even laughter, like I just read a really great interview with Thompson Highway, the playwright, where he was talking about how his philosophy is laughter and how important it is to include laughter in our worldview, and, you know, to balance sort of the heaviness that, like, I think a lot of us are experiencing the heaviness right now. Like,
for sure.
Yeah, like I'm sure everyone can identify with that. So the show tries to, you know, just tries to not answer any of those questions, but hold space for them and allow us to kind of, yeah, you know, maybe have a little bit of catharsis together in the way that theater can at the best of times.
Right. And I think audiences are kind of pining for that community experience that is theater too, right? Yeah. Where even if it's in a dark room and we're not really speaking to each other, there's like this, you can feel the vibe in the air, so to speak, you know, even in those moments of like, do we laugh or not laugh, or
yeah, you know? Yeah. Have you been going to shows a little bit again?
I've started going back. Yeah, I've started going back to cinemas and actual live theater. And, you know, obviously with my own protocols and making sure that I feel comfortable where I'm going. And I think everybody's really polite and just sort of smiling, big smiles through our eyes if we're wearing masks, you know, so that at least we can tell each other that we're happy to be back. It's very nice. So I've gone with friends and alone just to see if there's a difference. Yeah,
I've had similar experience to you. Yeah, just it feels like, oh my God, am I allowed to do this? And on the other hand, I'm almost giddy. Like I missed live performance so much. And yeah, like you mentioned, like that moment when the lights go down just before the show, that's one of my favorite moments in life, just before a show starts. And like to not have that for so long has been really hard. Yeah.
I know. I'm looking forward to just going a little bit more often than I have lately. But speaking of bringing people back to theater, I know that the show is going to be pay what you can afford. Can you talk about why that is important, especially during current times?
Yeah, we've been whenever we self-produce our own stuff and we can kind of, have the final say on box office and ticketing, we've been doing pay what you can afford since the first time we did this show, actually in 2016. I don't know if we've been able to do it for sometimes when we co-produce, it's a little out of our hands, but
Sure.
Whenever we can, we try to have pay what you can afford tickets. And for us, it was like, at first it was like an idea of like, well, when we first did this show, people paid after the show, which was logistically a bit difficult, but it was sort of like, okay, now that you saw the show, why don't you pay us what you feel like the art was worth?
Interesting.
Which that opened up an interesting dialogue. Again, that's not always possible just logistically, but even now what we try to do is keep things financially accessible. Like I think unfortunately theater is one of the most really expensive things. Like, you can go to a movie for $17, but sometimes theater shows cost like $50 or $60.
But I mean, look at the list of production staff and, everybody's putting work into the art, right? So, there's a reason for admission prices, but at the same time, you also want to make sure people can access art, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. It's that conundrum where the actual costs are quite high, but then the people that want to go are usually in a position where it's difficult to shoulder those costs. So, yeah, I mean, we try to just, have lower expectations of box office so that we don't worry about the budget, kind of getting in disarray. And then also we found that no matter what, like if it is pay what you can afford, we usually end up selling about the same amount of tickets and sort of the median ticket price stays the same. So I'm really happy about that. Yeah. So that people, and I've had people be like, oh, I really liked it and I paid $5. So I came back again and, they had $10, but they got to see it twice. And to me, that's fantastic. And we've done a little something different with this one where it's like, we have 4 tiers. So there's like a $15 ticket, which I think we get like something like $11 or $12 of that. Then there's like something like 25, 40, I think, and then 60. And it's like 60 is like, okay, you're feeling generous. Like we feel like the art is worth it. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of staff and a lot of work, but we know everyone can't pay that. And then you can and then it's like, regular price, discount, big discount. But then we've also got a certain block of tickets each night that if you come to the theater and pay in cash, you can pay whatever you want. Like you can pay $1, $5, whatever. So we're hoping that, money won't be a problem. And also just on the subject of accessibility and safety as well, the theater center is we're operating at a reduced capacity. We're still asking patrons to wear masks and show a vaccine passport. So I know, maybe the government has moved on, but we're still treating it like we're in another wave. And unfortunately, that's the way things are. But we want our team to feel safe. We want the audience to feel safe so they can just kind of come and enjoy.
I know. And I thank you for mentioning that, because I think sometimes some audience members may be reluctant because they don't feel comfortable in a full space. So I can testify that these protocols are helpful. I've managed to feel really comfortable when I've gone to theaters that do have some safety protocols. So I do encourage people to attend this show. So it's at the theater center. And when does it start?
We have a preview on April 21st. And then opening night is April 23rd. And then it runs until May 1st. So it runs about a week, but it's 2 weekends plus a week. So there's about 10 shows. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So that's Italian Mime Suicide at the theater center.
Yes.
Thank you, Adam. That was great.
Thank you. That was lovely talking to you. Thank you.
Perfect.